Yeah, it's an option. Sure. Anyone else have another option? Yes?
It doesn't matter who has just done the whole.
Say it once again.
It doesn't matter who's come to me, but multiple have.
It doesn't matter who has spoken up. Multiple people have indicated to me that they're uncomfortable with biblical imagery, quotes, prayers. Yes?
Well, can't you technically not even talk about the employees and say that you've witnessed it, like you've gone into the office?
Yes, exactly. I could. Another option is not to say I have heard, but I've gone into your office. Many people come into your office. Your office is not a private space. And we have clients or customers or beneficiaries, other agencies, other stakeholders come into your office, and we don't want anyone to feel uncomfortable working with us. So you could do that as well. So you notice by working on a problem together, what happens? More options, more ideas, easier to figure out what the right course of action is. So this is why we say ethics is a contact sport. You can't play it by yourself, and it requires lifetime individuals together. So what do these situations teach us? We are all global citizens. There is no such thing as a one country only business these days. If you use the internet, if you use email, that's a global communication system. Even if you are operating a bakery in your local county, because all businesses now depend on this global community that we work in. Ethical values are universal. How we prioritize them differs. But how we express values are culturally determined. Our supervisor could say, but in my country, as a leader, I must also be recognized by a church or a religious institution. That's how in my country we recognize authority. And so you've got to be able to say, those are things you're going to have to navigate, and they'll be sticky. Rules alone cannot give you the answer to all these situations. Can you have a rule about the colleague who follows you into the cafeteria asking to borrow money? That's a really silly rule. I mean, how could you make rules that specific? But a focus on ethics and values helps us bridge these differences in a global marketplace. Now, someone at this point is going to say, well, how on earth did you get into the UN? I mean, where does this kid from the Midwest come off to get into the UN? Well, I was drafted for my first job as the Chief Ethics Officer of the American Red Cross. I got tapped on the shoulder. And the story is either I was volunteered or I was drafted. I kind of think it was a little bit of both, because the then president of the American Red Cross, Dick Schubert, former Solicitor General of the Department of Labor, and former CEO of Bethlehem Steel, basically said, when I came to him, Dick, we ought to do something about ethics at the Red Cross. He said, thanks for volunteering. To which I said, well, what do you want me to do? And he said, that's why I want you to figure it out. You have 18 months. Come tell me. And the program that he supported continues to this day. 1985 to 2018, the same materials are still being used in the American Red Cross to lead conversations about ethics. So for the UN, I was asked to apply. I applied. 8-9 months later, because it takes that long to get a job at a place with an org chart that looked like what you just looked at. It really does take that long. I got a phone call from the number 2. If the Secretary General would call you and ask you to be his Chief Ethics Officer, what would you say? To which I said I would say yes. Which he said, thank you very much. The next voice you will hear will be that of the Secretary General. And so then he asked me the question, would you accept my position? And I said, yes, very much. And then he said, how soon can you get here? And then we began to negotiate the job. I did not know what my salary would be until 3 months after I began to work there, because that's the kind of place it is. I was working before I actually got on the payroll, because there was a big press conference July 1 that they wanted me to be present at, while the UN opened up and announced its new judicial system. So Many leaders have said there is no right way to do the wrong thing. But we have many examples of leaders who continue to do the wrong thing. It's not just all of us who think about values and issues and decision making. The kinds of things that the Rutland Institute helps everyone at Clemson figure out. But leaders do say some really dumb things. So who said, "L'État, c'est moi"? The state, it is me. Napoleon, but Charles de Gaulle really made it popular. I alone can fix it. Several leaders. Franco of Spain, Mussolini of Italy, and Donald J. Trump. And my favorite, but you don't understand, I'm French. Dominique Strauss-Kahn, who I worked for when I was the chief ethics officer at the International Monetary Fund, said to me after I said, "Sir, we've just gone through an enormous, gut-wrenching time examining your personal behavior by engaging into a sexual relationship with an employee 5 rungs on the pyramid below you. The board has looked at this. They let you keep your job. They have publicly admonished you. They have asked you, and you have done so, to make a public apology. And they've basically reminded you that moral leadership and ethical leadership is not the same as merely following the rules." So to DSK I said, however, after all of that, employees still are saying they are nervous being in a room alone with you. Female employees wonder if they can travel on mission. Will they be safe? To which he said, "But you don't understand, we're French." Now, you all know the end of that story. Several years later, he was pulled off of an airplane by the police authorities. He has his career that had been so promising as a national leader is in shatters. His marriage is over, he is divorced, and he has gone pretty much quietly into the good night. For what? Not recognizing the difference between public and private behavior. And the IMF continues to deal with the long tail of that scandal, because even to this day, the current managing director, Christine Lagarde, has talks all the time about how we comport ourselves, that the workplace must be safe for everyone, from violence, from abuse, from harassment. And those are lessons that organizations, unfortunately, have to continue learning over and over and over. So I'll stop here with a favorite quote about leadership. This is the late Nelson Mandela, who led South Africa into the promised land, out of apartheid, and into the beginnings of a representational democracy. And yes, it is a very fragile country and a fragile government. Yes, there have been many, many corruption scandals. But what does Mandela say? A leader is like a shepherd. He stays behind the flock, letting the most nimble go out ahead, whereupon the others follow, not realizing that all along they are being directed from behind. So let me close with just one more true story. And this is the story of Fatih. And let me pull up that last slide that'll just set the stage. Fatih works for UN Women, a small UN agency. Oh, that's not quite where I thought I'd get. That's where I'm going to get. She has secured the first official working party level meeting between UN Women, her agency, and the Morsi government, the first Muslim Brotherhood government in Egypt. Mubarak has left, He fled to Sharm el-Sheikh. He was arrested. He is incarcerated. At this point, it is 2014. Tahrir Square has happened. The Morsi government is the first time that Egypt has had an elected government, an elected president, and he is a member of the Brotherhood, the Islamic Brotherhood, the Muslim Brotherhood. So Fatih is quite nervous. She is herself an observant Muslim woman. She always covers her hair by wearing veils or scarves, dresses very modestly. Her wrists are covered, her ankles are covered, and she usually wears a very modest jacket, a long tunic or jacket, to show that she is in fact an observant Muslim woman. She prepares. She is going to meet with 30 people of the Islamic Brotherhood in this government first meeting. Do you get the high stakes? She wants to talk about how the government needs to support teenage girls, something all of us can relate to. She comes into the meeting and she discovers there are 30 people there. She walks in. The 30 people, mixture of men and women. The women all wear burqas. They are covered completely. Only their hands and their eyes are visible. The men wear beards. They are also observant by dress. Silently, everyone stands up, turns their chairs around, and sits down. The room is silent. What should Fatih do? What do you think Fatih should do at this moment? This is the kind of ethical challenges that we encounter in the world. These are the kinds of questions that you will be prepared to address. Can she stop at this moment and say, everyone don't go anywhere, I'm going to go call my ethics officer? No, right? She can't, it's not a video you can stop. She can't say, I'm going to call 160 people together and ask them what to do. She can't do that. But she's got to think on her feet. What did Fatih do? She continued making her presentation to 30 people, and she talked to their backs. And she figured they will listen and gain. I'll have a chance to present. They may not interact with me or ask me questions, but I am not going to stand away or leave or permit my own confusion or embarrassment to prevent me from delivering my message about health and educational opportunities for teenage girls. That is courage. And so as we conclude, and before we move into the Q's and A's, I'll move the chair back over here so no one trips. Fatih told me this story 3 or 4 months after it happened to her. And you could tell she was still concerned. Did she do the right thing? By how she told the story. But as she tells her story, over time, I believe that she is more comfortable that for that moment in time, she did the right thing. So thank you all very much. Thanks to the Rutland Institute, thanks to Mr. Rutland, thanks to Bill McCoy, thanks to the professors, the faculty, the staff of Clemson University. I have no more to tell you other than the world is made up of stories, not of atoms. We learn about ethics through the stories that we share and the questions that we ask. So now, while you're thinking of a good question, and please think that you're only starting with the second question, not the first question, because the second question is easier. John Chardy, another poet, American poet, in his book Manner of Speaking, and John Chardy is still alive, a good question is never answered. It is not a bolt to be tightened into place, but a seed to be planted and to bear more seed toward the hope of greening the landscape of ideas. So who's going to ask me a few questions? We have time to share and learn together for those of you who are not so desperate to go eat supper.